Even though the season has just ended, Formula 1 news is coming out now more than ever before. So what better opportunity to talk about Alpine, their stay in Formula 1, and what their drivers think about the team. Let's just say things are going to get a bit spicy in this video. Let's get right into the focus and make sure to stick with us until the end to find out what Ocon really thinks of Alpine and what his opinions are regarding Max Verstappen. So we all know what happened this year during the silly season. All the Alpine chaos was really fun to watch from an outsider's perspective. First, Fernando Alonso leaving for Aston Martin, Oscar Piastri, who was a reserve driver, also leaving for McLaren, and then ending up not knowing who to hire to drive for them in 2023. At the end, they decided to make an all-French team, hiring Pierre Gasly to drive for them. But since their return to Formula 1 in 2019 under the name Renault, the team hasn't been performing as it expected. In fact, it's even speculated by us fans and their own drivers that they're not profitable as a racing team and therefore could end up leaving the sport without going back to the good old days of dominance they had experienced with Alonso. The team has finished 4th this season in the Constructors' Championship, which is a big improvement from last year's 5th, but still a long way to go to reach the top. So, what's the problem with the team? Well, for one, their reliability. We spend hours and hours talking about how Ferrari threw away a whole championship because of their reliability issues. So we often skip over other minor teams, and this is one of them. This season, the French team has collected a whole lot of DNFs, with the most important one being in Abu Dhabi, when Alonso had his last race with the team, which is a shame for the Spanish driver who couldn't even do donuts with his friends and opponent Sebastian Vettel for his last race. This is probably for the same reason Ferrari got a horrible second half of the season, which was starting out with max engine power and then having to lower it in order to preserve the power unit. Well, Alpine did the same thing, but they didn't lower it even when conditions got critical, which means their cars weren't really competitive with their grid penalties for new components taken. The second reason the team hasn't been competitive is their drivers. Don't get me wrong, Alonso and Ocon are amazing drivers, but let's just say that they haven't worked together like they were supposed to. Even though nowadays we see often teammates arguing with each other, we've seen with Perez and Verstappen or Leclerc and Sainz, but these two are a bit exaggerated and clearly like to fight with one another. Of the two, Ocon is the one being a bit more aggressive more frequently. In a recent interview, he stated that it's good that he's going to Aston Martin and that we're going our own way. Honestly, the work was 98% on my back and 2% on his. I was overworked, I did all of the development. That was some big words from him, and it clearly explains how much the relationship between the two has been going downhill. This heat in the air is something probably due to Ocon's obsession with placements and competitiveness, which for him meant that sacrificing this friendship was worth it. This is really ungrateful on his side, as Alonso helped him win the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix by holding Lewis Hamilton behind for 11 laps straight, and the win would have probably never have happened if Alonso didn't do his part. And despite that, Ocon has been a menace all season long. We've seen what happened between the two in the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix more than ever before. Alonso had gotten a great start, and as a consequence, he caught up to Ocon's rear wheels. The Frenchman then decided to go for an incredibly dangerous move, steering lightly to the left, but enough to push his teammate into the barriers, meaning he had to lift off and lose a lot of speed. The double world champion was heard saying on the radio, "Never in my life have I seen a defense like Esteban's today." Not only that, but doing this move on his own teammate, he was forced to take a really weird line through turn 1, which meant Lewis Hamilton, who started behind both of them, passed them on the outside, in a W13. That has to be one of the most shameful things ever. And once again, not only that, but when Alonso came out of the pits on fresher tyres, he didn't let him pass, defending first into turn 1, then into turn 2, where in order to almost push Alonso onto the grass, he left the door wide open for Daniel Ricciardo, who pulled off a double overtake in his McLaren. Yep, you heard that right, Daniel Ricciardo in a McLaren overtook both of them in one corner. Again, that has to be one of the worst things that could happen to a driver in 2022. But let's not just demonise Ocon, as Alonso has been doing his part too in this situation. Let's look at one incredibly obvious example, shall we? Well, in the Brazilian Grand Prix during Saturday's sprint race, he was forced off track by his teammate, but this time he didn't take it lightly. On that same lap, he took Ocon's slipstream down the main straight before slamming into the back of his car, breaking off his front wing. He followed with a radio message saying, "I lost the front wing thanks to our friend," even though his teammate had done nothing wrong. What Alonso did was not only unprofessional, but also incredibly dangerous, as he could have made Ocon spin by pushing him from behind at almost 300 km/h. He was later punished by the FIA and given a 5-second time penalty. And fair enough, I'd say. The fact that during this silly season, or the summer break as it's usually called, Alonso leaving the team meant that he didn't hold back during the second part of the season. Not only that, Ocon is probably someone difficult to agree with. In fact, he's a bit of a snob and he overestimates himself. In a recent interview, he even declared that he could beat Max Verstappen if he was given the same car. Personally, I don't think he's someone you want to work with, and people like this make your job, in this case racing, a whole lot more difficult. Now I know why Alonso changed team. Even Alpine's management is one of the worst in this sport. They've gone from having a driver who was just prepping up for the seat for a young prospect to having to buy another driver's contract in order to have 2 cars to race with, and then calling it a marketing stunt since they are both French. And this doesn't mean that Ocon is going to be friendly with the new arrival Gasly, because even though he said that they really like each other, we know that Ocon's character could mean that these two end up arguing with one another most of the time. And sadly for the team, there is nothing that they could do that would help them fix this problem, as it comes from the roots. We've seen how Otmar Schaffnauer, Alpine's current team principal, reacted to Alonso's departure, calling him old and washed out, expecting him to be competitive for just a few more years before he would eventually be forced into retirement. That isn't something nice to say, and it surely doesn't shine a positive light on the already failing team. Add in the fact that they aren't respected on social media either, and you've got yourself a recipe for disaster. As an example, after the Sao Paulo sprint, they posted a tweet stating that there had been hundreds of toxic comments regarding that race, and that fans' response was to laugh in their faces. But how could they get any better? Well, for one, they are already getting better. By getting Gasly in the team next year, they're opening the possibility of having a nice and friendly team to work with, if they manage to make the pair work with one another instead of fighting each other like we've seen in 2021 and 2022 with the precedent couple. Then they're going to need some new management and staff, as the car was competitive only because of their really powerful engine and was overused throughout all of the season, because otherwise they would have been destroyed by pretty much everyone. Also, getting some stable reserve drivers that don't plan on going against their own team in the near future could help them out a lot. But we all know that won't happen. So what do you think? What, in your opinion, could fix the problem with Alpine? Who deserves a seat in that team order to fix it? Let us know with a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe, because at 10,000 subscribers, we're going to enter the Alpine Drivers Academy and try to fire everyone in the team so that we can finally bring it back to the old days of glory. No, not really, but you should subscribe anyway.